Hello, everyone, and welcome to the City of Pittsburgh celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month. This month, we are talking about diversity and inclusion in our hiring process. So our interview today is Beyond Diversity, Inclusive Hiring, and we are incredibly fortunate today to be here with Louis Irizarry. He is a staffing consultant here in the City of Pittsburgh. He has nearly a decade of experience with human resources and accounting. He's currently assisting organizations with their human capital needs, particularly surrounding diverse talent. So we are incredibly lucky to have him here with us today to talk a little bit about what inclusive hiring really means. So welcome, Lou. Thank you for joining us.
I'm humbled to be here. Thank you so much for thinking of me, and what a great month and such relevant information. No matter what community you're involved with. So excited to be here.
Absolutely. This one is one of my favorites. Our diversity and inclusion series in general is incredibly important to me and close to my heart. Diversity and inclusion is a passion project of mine, but Hispanic heritage is always my favorite. It's my community, so I hope that we really get some great information out to people.
I think the only thing we're missing are the snacks and the food items, right?
Yes,
Expect the box
absolutely.
to be mailed.
If I thought ahead, I should have sent some food. We could have had a lunch or something. All right, well, jumping right in, I want to hear a little bit about you and your experience and really just what drives you to help with the human capital needs, especially when we're talking about diverse talent. So tell me a little bit about your journey.
Yeah, so I grew up in Northeast Ohio, so the Rust Belt area, is one that I'm very familiar with. I think Pittsburgh, on a side note, has done. Obviously, we're very privileged to be in an area that's bounced back from that era, whereas maybe Northeast Ohio is still kind of rebuilding. So I played sports. I played football, kind of growing up, and that was dominated a lot of time. And throughout college had several interests, but ended up really falling in love really with accounting and the financial aspects of businesses. So, outside of school or once kind of sports in college was over, got into accounting. Fast forward, relocated to Pittsburgh, have been here almost 8 years. Got into some accounting and consulting work. Somewhere down the line, I was able to, with an employer, kind of embark on some special projects and get involved with human resources and compliance, and really saw an angle to mesh some of that performance and ability to help others, and at the same time affect the bottom line and impact of within an organization. So really didn't want to let that go, and found my way into the staffing world where for me, it's the people aspect and helping others and being able to make an impact for various communities. That kind of means the world to me. So that's kind of what drives me. Merging the networks, merging nonprofit work with organizational outcomes, and bringing it all together to kind of be an ally, see that change firsthand, but also talk to companies about good strategies on how they might be able to attract and retain diverse talent here in Pitt.
Absolutely. It's interesting too, right now we're living in unprecedented times, and that for so many reasons. Not only are we living in this COVID-19 world, which took us from having that in-person event to having this interview, but also with the push for companies to really understand diversity and to really embrace it. We're living in these times that are brand new to everybody. With this interview particularly, and with what we're trying to do, we really want to engage our current employees and help them learn and grow and sort of mitigate some of that confusion and that fear of we don't know what's happening. But we also want to reach out to the people who might be unemployed right now and looking for a position, and really showing them the City of Pittsburgh especially is committed to helping everyone into bridging that gap into bringing in the best talent. So with all of that in mind and all of these changes and everything that we're going through, what are some of the challenges that you're facing when you're talking to candidates or you're talking to the companies that you're sourcing for?
Yeah, so the new normal, right? And
Yeah.
what does that mean? And you have there's there's two folds to this. You know, you have from an organizational standpoint, and you have from a job seeker. You know, you and I, maybe we were displaced, maybe there's more work than ever because of some changes and some leaning up within the way the companies operate. But I think that the biggest change by far is this remote capability, right? The capabilities are there, but you know, how do I get FaceTime with the influencers or my superiors? From an organizational standpoint and a job seeking standpoint, how do I successfully conduct an interview? The interview process has changed in that, you know, hey, we're on video, and I need to have that interpersonal connection in the body language, and as well as, you know, being able to communicate my skills. Employees and a lot of folks right now, I think that the key idea is flexibility. So whether it be, you know, leveraging technology, but also, you know, kids are learning remotely too. If you have children, those relationships with your managers and directs and the companies are more important than ever for that flexibility. And then safety. You know, how many times do I go into the office? Can I count on you to keep us safe? And I think that the state has done a job of communicating a lot of things, you know, compared to other parts of the country. But there still are some gray areas that I think for the most part, you know, I'm confident Pittsburgh companies are doing the right things to try to move forward. Overall, the trends of working from home have really quickened. You know, the idea of you know, being your authentic self and being casual, maybe not wearing as many suits. I think that's kind of sped up. You know, work from home is kind of here to stay, I would say. And even though downtown is so beautiful and there are some great office spaces, I expect the flexibility to continue. So those are all kind of challenges to get someone from, you know, point A to point B, whether it be a new opportunity or a promotion or, you know, a team meeting. So that's kind of what I've heard for the most part.
Absolutely. It is an interesting time, and I think it's fascinating and fantastic. There is more of this blend of being able to speak to your managers, being able to speak to your company, sort of that feeling of we're all in it together, of where your personal life in the past has always been very separate. Your children's learning or whatever it is has been maybe thought about, but that work-life balance hasn't been nearly as blended as it is today. So it is interesting. It's big changes, and hopefully ones that we do continue to keep taking forward with us. So I know that sourcing can be an issue. I disclose my HR career started in recruitment. So it is an interesting and fast-paced
You know, well.
environment, right? We're constantly trying to find new talent. And when we're looking at positions, especially positions that are specialized, when we think about the STEM fields and things like that, or for the city, when we really think about our engineering positions, not only is it difficult to find really great qualified talent, but finding really great diverse talent becomes an even bigger issue of, are we looking in the right places? How are we reaching out to people? What are we doing? What kinds of things are you doing, or what advice do you have for us for really looking for and intentionally finding diverse talent to bring into the workplace?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head, right? Where do you look? Because I think the overwhelming issue is the number of applicants. So how do we increase that number so that way during our normal hiring activities and how we kind of narrow down onto your top three or whatever it may be, that there's a greater sample size and ultimately more diversity in that final slate. So I think that's a Pittsburgh issue, but it's also a national issue. So how are we, you know, employers, it was highly encouraging to see how many companies are saying, hey, I would like this to be a diverse hire, or this must be a diverse hire. You know, for someone like me, it's a great thing to hear and see and be a part of. But it does, you have to get creative. And I think, you know, from my perspective, it's looking at outside areas, you know, outside the city of Pittsburgh. It's looking at students and graduate students who may be here and don't really have that connection yet. You know, they're traveling, they're going back to families and areas of the country they're from, but how do we keep them here? So I think, you know, the resources have changed a bit. You know, there's always the Indeeds and the Monsters, but you know, there's Handshake now that connects the community of students, and a lot of those are transient students. They may have moved back. So staying in constant contact, I found, was pretty successful in using other software platforms, and not only just Facebook or social media, but you know, just establishing that relationship long term with someone who may be moving and may be on the fence if they're going to stay in this area. You know, recruiting from or looking at folks from HBCUs, you know, primarily or institutions that have a great number of diverse students. That becomes more of a practical, this takes a little bit of effort because I may not be up the road from this college out in Philadelphia, but there's a high number of diverse applicants that could be interested in an area like Pittsburgh that has so much going for itself, such as the cost of living, the number of opportunities. Overall, I think the area has an amazing, a higher ceiling for diverse candidates. You know, there is a need, and I know this is nationally, but you know, I can only speak to where I'm at, and it's extremely positive. So with these tools, I'm sure that you know, that it'll be a good challenge to see how we can keep folks here instead of bringing them in.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that you talked about that sort of handshake approach as well. And when we're talking about students, our area has a reputation for being an aging population. And when we look at the numbers, that has been changing over the last several years, but it is a challenge. I'm one of those people that went away for college and then happened to come back, but I know I'm in the minority. So it is great to be able to hear people say and to recognize that we do need to reach out to those students who haven't made a decision yet, especially ones who might feel isolated, who might be diverse candidates, who are looking around and not seeing people who they necessarily feel like they're engaged with or attached to or look like or whatever it is. It's so helpful to be able to do that outreach and to think outside of the city and
Yeah.
be able to try and go to other areas and bring people back. We have so much to offer. They should come here.
Yeah, and I've seen a growing number of, you know, hey, we're in Florida, we're in Texas or New York, but you know what, it's time to buy a house. We want some more square footage. We want more work-life balance. Hey, I can work remotely. I want to be in a more affordable area with, you know, better family structures. So we have all of those things, and I think people will continue to see that at a quicker pace here now that things are remote. We do have Big Four, we do have big institutions, and a progressive modern government system that is you know, a great opportunity for anyone trying to start their career.
Absolutely. And thinking at some of those big companies and really the push for being more open, being more inclusive, we also know that we're in this time where people and companies are recognizing that it's important. But there's also been this misunderstanding of why it's important. Or you get that question from companies or individuals who might not understand why diversity and inclusion in the workplace is such an important thing to build a company. What do you do when you have companies or employers that you're looking at that might have that pushback? Or why do you think it's important for us to keep pushing this banner of we have to have diversity and inclusion in the workplace?
Yeah, so we're seeing a lot more of that, right? You know, on one end, I have calls that, hey, I want a diverse candidate, but it never it's always great to hear from that company and say, wow, you know, you're on to something, you're ahead of the pack. I think the norm is, and even amongst family members, I just had a similar conversation where, you know, through their hiring experiences, hey, you know, I'm going to focus on the best person, you know, not a particular color or race or ethnicity. And while that's great, there are two sides to this story. One, you know, acknowledging from an organizational standpoint, this will impact your bottom line. This will impact team decisions that can result in greater revenue. But as far as your brand, you know, your customers are, you know, Hispanic, African American. they're Asian, they are a mix. So if your leadership and your staff doesn't, doesn't represent that, there's a disconnect at some point, and it will increase efficiency. So, kind of driving that home, but there are so many factors. I think the big one is the representation for customers, and back to how can companies do this easier and more effectively. I think that lessens the intimidation, and brings more of those candidates to the forefront to say, hey, we have a diverse slate, but these are really great candidates. These are the top candidates. And things like blind, resume review, where you're taking names off, increasing the diverse resumes in a stack by 20–30%. Those are small metrics that can make a big difference and hopefully result in a great hire. But back to your point, I think anytime the more these organizations continue feeling the effects of not having diversity on their teams and that opportunity cost, that's really going to be the driver. In the meantime, from a candidate perspective, realize there are hurdles, realize there are challenges, and you may be walking into a place where maybe someone won't look like you, but recognize that that's an opportunity to better yourself in your career, but also have that align with that organization that wants to better represent themselves.
Absolutely. I think that is also so important. I am a big believer in the, if you can see it, you can be it, but that is a challenge. When you have a company where you can't see it, it's harder to break in. Once you see it, it's easier to pull someone up behind you. I think there are some really interesting and unique challenges that face diversity candidates in general, but I think for the Latino and Hispanic community, there are some things culturally that can be, that we don't necessarily think about, or that we aren't always in the forefront and are hard to explain to employers. So for instance, I was at a panel a few years ago, and they talked about eye contact. There are so many cultures around the world, but in the Latino community especially, there's this pervasive feeling of when someone of authority is talking, you're not supposed to interrupt them. There can be this feeling of keeping your eyes downcast, or having that quiet moment of reflection, or not jumping in. And when we think about the culture in the US, especially in the workplace, the people who are willing to jump in and interrupt and have those ideas that they aren't holding back because of who's in the room tend to be rewarded. And we can lose Latino candidates for just little things like not understanding why someone won't interrupt, or why someone might not be making eye contact the way that you expect them to, or not being more cautious about pushing back on ideas that are coming from someone in a much higher position. What are some of the challenges that you've noticed, or what kind of advice do you have for candidates who might be facing some of those cultural nuances that they have to deal with, especially interviewing?
I thought of that example immediately. You don't look mommy in the eye when she's talking to you. And it took me it was an intentional process to maintain eye contact, and in a professional sense, that's the number one factor, right? Shake a hand, look in the eye, but it was tough. So these things are so interesting on so many levels, right? How we, what makes us who we are. But I think, and the beautiful thing is the Latino community, like most cultures, but in the Latino community, there exists such diversity as well, on a micro level, in different parts of the world, and different factors in family life that can affect you as a professional. My role is to help you in the recruiting process, right? So I'm thinking more so from looking at an opportunity or being promoted within an organization. I think the biggest factor I see is underselling. Now we all can kind of do that, but to undersell yourself on your skills, or and not just thinking about, okay, what else can I use to describe the accounts payable process that I did day in, day out? Sometimes you can sit there and say, what did I really do? when you're looking at it from one word, but in reality, it's a complex framework and you had so many responsibilities. So underselling yourself, companies are looking for you, your organization is looking for talent within because it's more cost effective, but who knows you better than someone who's already gone through the process and is able to make that change in an impactful way and garner that support internally. So, read the job description, know how it translates to your experience. I really stick by the opportunities here in this area in particular because of the lack of diversity, that the ceiling is higher. And I think with a little bit of coaching, don't be afraid to rely on allies. I'm in staffing, but I thoroughly enjoy talking about the career process. Give me a call. Let's talk about, okay, what the eye contact thing, or how can I phrase this in a way? I think overall it's about giving you the confidence you need to have those conversations. And I think in the past I've read that Harvard, the greatest when speaking in public is preparation. That will give you the most confidence. Well, the same is, if you have a big meeting tomorrow, knowing those numbers, knowing the results, and having 2 or 3 solutions will make you more inclined to raise your hand, regardless of the background you're from, because I think it's important to recognize performance, and then from a leadership perspective, recognize those who may have spoken up that don't typically speak up, and reward them for having those good ideas, whether it be a special commendation or just a pull aside. So it always is a two-sided approach, but I think with a little bit of coaching and it's a lot. It's not as much as one would think. To think you're a train wreck is unbelievably incorrect, right? It's 1 or 2 things that could make you really stand out and more confident in your ability to bring those ideas to the table.
Absolutely. I'm going to make a quick plug for training and development too. As the training and development person for the city, I am a firm believer that for an employer, training and development can be one of the most important things to really help mitigate some of those things as well. I know with the city, we actually have a training that is focused on hiring in the legal environment and understanding what blind recruitment can do, understanding what some cultural differences can do, and what the importance is, not just of when we talk about diversity, most people automatically assume that we're talking about race or ethnicity, but really just that diversity of thought. And to your point of there's so many different cultures, even the Latino community in general, it's 26 different countries, there's cultures, 3 continents, we're all over the world. So
Good
you can't, yeah, oh my gosh, so much food. But you can't box everyone. There are some things that are a similar experience or a common experience, but there are also so many things that aren't. And it's so important for us to speak to our managers, to speak to our hiring managers, especially of these are things that you can look for, but these are also things that might be your own bias putting in. If you have an introvert, they're not going to be able to speak up as much as you would expect. So how do you talk to them later on and talk to them after the meeting, to your point of pull them aside. Hey, you really talked up. That's not something you usually do. That was fantastic. Or, hey, you didn't really say anything, but I could tell by your body language that you had some thoughts. Why don't we sit down privately and talk about them? So many different ways that we can address those differences and issues. Absolutely.
Yeah, if you are a leader, look for those opportunities. Look for that person that's kind of behind a few people, and on the other end, ask your allies for help. Look at your network and increase your network. This is a great time to go through your LinkedIn list, find folks who maybe have taken on that career trajectory. Send them a message. Hey, give me 10 minutes, virtual coffee, so to speak, and just 10 minutes to kind of see what you did to get where you're at, because that's one quick way to learn, hey, this is a great track for me, and these are some skills I can incorporate in my day-to-day.
Absolutely. I also like that you're talking about really reaching out to that network and knowing who you can ask and being willing and available to help the people that do reach out to you. I think it's so important for our community in general, but really any community and any person to be able to look at their network and identify what are my weaknesses, who do I know that can really help me bridge those gaps and bring those forward so that I can be the most well-rounded person. So I want to circle back a little bit to that underselling point. I think that's something that I've seen a lot. It's something that I've definitely been guilty of, and something that I have worked really hard to try and coach others to bring out of, but it's such a challenge to say, these are the things that I've done. These are, it's that bragging rights, right? Like, I think for a lot of people, no matter what their background is, it's hard to feel like you're trying to sell yourself or you're over talking yourself. What advice do you have for people to bridge past those trouble spots, those things that might be a challenge for them, or to really be able to recognize it in themselves?
Yeah, so just to kind of build on that, the more you explore how, peers or organizations are looking at your experience, the more confident you're going to become. And I had mentioned this prior to us beginning, but sometimes we're in the day to day and we keep our head down. And don't forget to pick your head up and really look at, okay, where have I come within the last 6 months? How much progress did I make in the last year in terms of new skills? Update that resume if you're a little more like me, visual. Update it and be excited. Don't be too quick to kind of dismiss that as my job, because here's the reality. A lot of folks are looking for you, and even within an organization, one manager to the next can vary greatly. And I think it's about finding those relationships and aligning with those folks. And sometimes having these great conversations that, no one's asking anything from anyone. It's just conversational and something that most people are going to be willing to share. Hey, here's my journey. I'm humbled that you've taken an interest in it. Here's how I did it, I guess, and it's such a great conversation, and you never know, how that might sprout or how that person might think of you later on. So I still think allyship is increasingly undervalued and so important. And then, you're a qualified professional, and I think it's about gaining skills. So if you look at your career, as the journey across the country, the road trip, which stops do you want to make to really hone in on those skills? And I think that leads us to, I talk to folks all the time that may be exploring other options and say, hey, have you spoken to your manager? Have you spoken to leadership and said, this is where I want to be. How can you get me there? And I've seen organizations, take the job description and scrap it, make it into something else for a person to retain you, but also to get you exposure, test the waters, gain some new skills, get into project management, get into payroll or accounting, a host of other things. But I think it's important to stretch yourself, but take those calculated risks. Be ready for the additional work. You may have to stay an extra hour, a day or a week, but the value you're gaining from one, proving to yourself that, hey, I'm taking on these new skills and increasing my bandwidth, but also, somebody's looking. Pretend no one is looking, but someone's always watching, and I think that can be tremendously valuable in your organization.
Absolutely. I think there are some really important parts in there and a lot of important points, but you said it before, it is more cost effective for a company to retain good talent. We don't want to lose people. They say to every time you backfill a position, you lose 1/3 of their yearly salary if they leave. So
30%, 33.
Yeah, exactly. We do not want people to go. I know the city, we are very committed to retaining our talent, but knowing that with city government and really the public sector in general, there aren't always those pathways to clear promotion. So how do you enrich your job? How do you expand on it? And I think that point of talk to your manager, talk to your leadership. We want to keep you, so let us help you. I'm also a big fan of being able to volunteer in the community. And I know you're very active in the community as well, and have some board memberships and have taken some leadership positions. But I think that's such a great opportunity to start building those skill sets and then come back to your company and say, hey, look at these things that I've been doing in my free time. Look at what I'm working on. How do I incorporate these skills that I haven't had a chance to use on site into my daily life? And for people who want to apply to the city or anywhere else, also being able to take those skills and show, not only have I expanded my skill set, but I'm doing it on my own time because I am a committed professional. I think there's really nothing better that you can say about yourself as a professional than taking on that initiative.
Yeah, and to plug the city, I know the city is very supportive, extremely supportive of those efforts, especially out in the community, and it's highly encouraged. So that's, it's funny you say that, because I think, at least myself, I tended to silo those two worlds. I had a community bucket list and trajectory I wanted to follow, and really didn't think about it in a way that could help my career until, you start getting a relationship with board members, and you're not really going to let that mission fail because it's so critical, right? You're more eager to take on the challenge that no one's raising their hand for, because you trust yourself as well, that you won't let it go by the wayside. But those relationships turn into something, and next thing you know, you have a great network, or you have these skills that you say, this can help me at, during my day-to-day, or renew some interest in another area that is definitely attainable within your organization.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for all of your time today and all of your insights. Do you have any final thoughts or final words to share with everyone?
Yeah, I think it's important to think of diversity in general. There are a lot of different opinions floating around. Is it a weakness to think about diversity? Is it just, should it be more concrete, or for lack of better terms, black and white, or is it a strength? I think undoubtedly it's a strength, depending on well, not depending, but if you're looking at it from an organizational standpoint, you need this. You need diverse representation. And there are folks within your organization that have not yet been found. So we're getting better at that. And from an applicant side or a job seeking side, they want you. Companies are calling me. Natasha's telling you that we're looking for you internally. It saves us money. So don't be afraid to raise your hand and take on a few more challenges during this COVID era. Everyone's sort of pressing reset in a way. Make the most of it. Know that you are wanted, and the ceiling is very high here in Pittsburgh. That's my spiel.
Yeah, it's a good spiel. So I'm going to wrap up just saying thank you so much, Lou, for joining us today and for everything that you had to say. I'm going to make a quick plug for both our employees and for external candidates. Whether you're looking for a promotion or looking for to find your space in the city and to build your career, all of our positions are posted on pghjobs.net, pghjobs.net. Come check us out. I'm Natasha Molina, Senior Talent Development Coordinator here with the City of Pittsburgh. Thanks again, Lou. And if I could just ask you one more thing, if you could help me in saying Happy Hispanic Heritage Month to everybody.
Happy Hispanic Heritage Month, everyone. Make the most of it. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much.